So we'll begin, even though people are still signing in. Welcome everyone. If you're familiar with the Future Teacher sessions, everything we are sharing and showing today is publicly available to you instantly now and also after the webinar, and we'll touch on some of the access to resources and self-access to resources as we go through. These reactivated sessions are effectively repeats of the first time we've run the same topic. So the support of writing, I think we did in November 2017, and we're revisiting that and redoing it today. And the idea is that it's more flipped. So we set a pre-session activity that hopefully at least some of you did, more focused on activities, more rooted in real experience. We have some guest speakers each time. And also, because the project is officially kind of developed and available, we also have these kind of mini journeys, which you'll see on my screen now. There's a guide to that and a step-by-step guide that you can access in your own time. Lillian, I think you did a summary of what people said they were looking for during registration.
Yeah, so I went through what people said they wanted to get out of today's session. And on the whole, most people want new ideas and resources using educational technology. That's quite a common theme. Quite a lot of people want to be able to help students structure their academic writing, to develop flow, to find writing a bit more engaging. Some people want extra tips for helping students who are maybe just beginning writing or have English as a second language, and others want best exercises for developing writing. So when I compare that to the mind map of the kind of things that we're going to cover, we're also going to cover like alternatives to writing. I think only one person kind of mentioned that, but actually it's something for us to think about, challenging the why of writing, and some of the problems we're trying to address when we're kind of using writing as the kind of assignment type, right? So we've got lots of ideas for digitally supporting writing that could help with engagement, motivation, getting people started. And I really recommend looking at our mind map because you see there are other forms of writing worth developing that can bring about confidence and through different approaches. So yeah, something for everyone today.
Okay, great. We've got about 61 people in the room now, so that's good. We wanted to start off by just highlighting how much do your students know and what guidance do you make available to them, and that was obviously part of the pre-session activity as well. I know one or two people have posed that as a question, what pre-session activity? We'll come on to that anyway. There's some guides linked here. So in the reading session, we had some guides from University of York and University of Leicester and Open University, and we've changed the links there to point to the writing skills pages from those organisations as well. And Cardiff University kindly shared some Xerti examples that they make available to their students. So I'll just open this one, Essay Survival Guide, which is a Xerti resource as well. So very nice and very well designed. And these link off to many more kind of guides and tutorials on writing related subjects and topics. So again, there's a rich resource there you can access in your own time. And what we're going to ask you to do is to share examples and links to your organisation's resources. We have this resource. We've said that it's a revisited session. So we have the links to the previous pages in this resource and also the full recording of the previous running of the webinar. So you can access that in your own time if you haven't already. We also had some activities and resources. So if I just link back, this is within this particular resource we're looking at, and we'll be sharing the link to this with you shortly anyway. We had some tricidas or some transitions, as I think they're called when they're actually the resource you're interacting with. And we asked people to say or comment, why is writing a good way to assess students? and you can post your ideas about that. And this is still live. You can add some, but we're not asking you to do that as an activity now, but you certainly can still contribute to this and vote on the comments that are, and arguments that are there. And just a quick point that if you're prompted to sign in, you don't have to. You can select no thank you, I don't want to, and still vote and still post additional ideas. So as well as why is writing a good way to assess students, we asked people in the previous session to comment on when it's a bad way to assess student learning as well. And you can access these comments and as I say, interact with them in your own time. So we're not repeating that activity here. We also came up with some frameworks, and there's some detailed guidance here on the various frameworks that you might want to apply to your supportive writing. And again, you can access these in your own time. We had a questionnaire that is actually directly related to those frameworks and takes you through some questions. So this might be something you do for yourself, or that you work with colleagues to work through, to identify where you can make improvements and changes, or where you're lacking in the support that is needed. There's a case study from Teresa McKinnon, and again, you can access this in your own time. So, and a detailed mind map, which I think Alistair is going to talk about shortly. So when we get back onto the reactivated session and the new resources, we have, as we've already covered, what you wanted to learn and some example guides, and we're going to ask you to share your guides that we can add to this page, not during the webinar, but after the webinar. So that's the quick review of what's already there and available to you. And by the way, the mind map, you can copy that and edit it, so you could use that as a starting point for your own writing resource. But the pre-session task that we sent out, and hopefully some people have looked at that, we asked you to look at the study skills guidance in your own institution, and then decide which of the frameworks, so the page that I just showed, for writing, that they cover, be it rhetorical or metacognitive and so on. So what we'd like you to do as a follow-up task to that, and if you haven't, perhaps you can quickly consider those questions in the text chat. What did you find? Are there areas to develop further? And you know, any thoughts you have about those resources that we've included, or resources that you provide to your students in your organization. And I'll put the link to the text chat in the text chat to this. I think Alistair may have already done that, but there's the link to this one. So we'd ask you to, in the text chat, just respond one of those two follow-up tasks, really. If you did do the pre-session task, we'd be very keen to hear from what you found and whether the frameworks are relevant and useful. And if you didn't, there probably isn't time to quickly go through those resources now. So perhaps share any links to resources that you do have and that do work, and we can take those after the webinar and add them to that previous page. And this is one of those times when during the text chat things go a bit silent. So as you're responding, perhaps Lillian and Alistair, have you got any additional comments to add? Alistair, I know that you're muted.
Sorry, I was.
We were both talking in mute.
We were
then.
both chatting away. Yeah. The point I was making very quickly was that I think it's really helpful to have a look at your guidance. I've looked at probably about 40 universities study skills guidance over the work I've been doing over the last few years. Very, very rarely do I find the kind of things that we're going to be looking at during this session. I find lots of really good classical advice, but it's so classical it could have been written by medieval monks. So let's see if we can move beyond that, looking at the, comparing what you've done with the sorts of frameworks that are there. Does your guidance fit all those different areas? Think about social, affective, mindset, emotion, and all those things that we know now are big contributors. And then we'll look at some of the technologies as well shortly.
I think it's a great challenge. You know, anyone who is coming from the academic skills department who are, you just have ownership of a small part of the student's world in terms of affecting their writing. A big part of that encouragement is going to come from their tutors. So you have to kind of create agency throughout quite a few different stakeholders who will impact your learners' writing. But if you use this framework that we introduce here in Future Teacher, it helps everybody to kind of try and come together so that the student only has to go to one place to get a lot of what they need for writing. Right now, I can see a lot of students are having to kind of go pecking in different sites from different teams and pull it all together in their own heads. So maybe we should do some of that pulling together for them.
So we're getting a number of people contributing to the chat, and equally there's probably a number of people that didn't spot the pre-session task, didn't have access to it, who are quickly looking at their study skills information at the moment. So we can give people a couple of minutes or so.
It'd be useful, people, if you could, like you say, drop in the chat like Emily has done, the pages that we can draw from, because when everyone can see everyone else's pages, you can all start to kind of go, what's the best bits from other universities that we can use to illustrate to our colleagues that we should bring some of this information together. So it's a good way to kind of learn from each other's resource. So Helen's asking a question, Alistair, how the frameworks map onto academic literacies.
I think, I'm not sure, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by academic literacies there, Helen. So if you could clarify that. Are you thinking of, like a literacy in law compared to a literacy in biology or something? Because I think that there's definitely a subject-based, curriculum-based lens through which you can look at these things. And that will be slightly different, but I think some of the underlying things and some of the things we look at later in terms of developing, student skills, I think they almost are at a layer above, or maybe a layer below. Maybe it's a kind of foundational layer that can then influence the individual divergences in different literacies. So technical study skills, socialization, or more disciplined, specific, negotiated. Okay, and what was the one above, Jack?
Idea of study skills, academic socialization, and academic literacies. Yeah. So it's quite interesting. It's like generally people call it study skills, which includes the writing, element, academic support in writing.
I can't promise to do this for everyone's links, but thanks to those that were early sharing the links, their examples, I put University of Leeds and Aston University links on that page already. So
yeah,
he's a quick worker, is Ron.
Yeah, Ross mentions that they've got some excellent. Well, they've got some Xertes for certain skill areas. So I think we have capacity maybe where people can, like I say, learn from the best approaches between us to help motivate and engage and help students who are early learners, early academic writers. And I think based on, this is just my perspective, right? Reading what a lot of our academic skills tutors are writing, they clearly have a taxonomy they use. They have their own sub-language, as every discipline does. And some of it's opaque to your average person, but it just makes me think that when we're organizing our websites for learners, are we still coming at it from a professional point of view and organizing things in these boxes that make no sense to the learner. To them, it's just writing. And they just want to know, how can I write better? And how can I write faster? And how can I get started? They're not using any academic terms to start with.
And one of the issues is we very often give people, and this is something that we picked up in the previous one, first time around with this, is people will often give people a model good answer. But the trouble is, if you don't know why it's a model good answer, and if you can't compare the model good answer with a model not quite so good answer and a model bad answer, then it becomes really tricky. What I'll do now, and just keeping in terms of the time, I think it's worth us having a look at the, I think, is it me next, Ron?
Yeah, and can you share your screen, Alistair? Because we've had some people that are wanting to sign in, and so I need to try and respond to them. So
okay,
yeah, I'll stop.
Yeah, I'll share my screen now. Okay, can I check, Lillian, is that showing through?
Yep, that's
okay. So I'll go, I'll just move on from where we were there. Okay, so the mind map. Now the mind map is on page 12 of the resource that we've sent you the link to. I'm going to pop it in here. Here's the direct link to it if you haven't already got that. And you can also open it up if you want to have it bigger, open it up in Mindmeister with a separate link, which I will put in here as well. In fact, I'll give you the full screen one. And I'm going to put that here. So full screen on Mindmeister. And that means if you've got a Mindmeister account, or even just a free account that gives you up to 3, you can just copy and edit hours, add your own, oh sorry, I put the wrong wrong link in there. I thought it was still on the clipboard. That's the one you need. That's if you wanted to see it directly in Mindmeister. Now I'm going to show it to you directly in Mindmeister, and I'm going to zoom out just to start with. But what you will notice is that we've got lots of different elements to this. So we look at different types of writing. We look at different writing alternatives, because very often writing is a default way of doing assessments, and it needn't be. It's a default way that benefits some students, not others. So, we've got some ideas there for alternatives. We've got different reasons for writing. We've got other bits, other elements that have come up in discussions and so on. But the bit that I really want to look at is the bit that I find missing in the vast majority of study skills areas I look at, and that's this digital support for writing. And sometimes it sits between different stools. Sometimes it will be kind of under library skills. Sometimes it will be slightly under assistive technology even. But what I want to look at here is I've developed a simple acronym to make writing a doddle. And if that's helpful, feel free to use it and plagiarize it. But here we've got, the discovery, the organizing, the deciding which bits you're going to include, which bits you're not going to include. That's kind of almost a pass on from organizing. You put it out in organize your overall structure, and then you decide, okay, with that overall structure, this goes here, and then I might miss out this bit, add in that bit, and so on. And then there's the drafting. So I've got my big picture, I start drafting, and then there's the language element, making sure that my style is good, style checking, level checking, and then the editing. So if we look at each of those, for each of those, and we've got links to every one of these, if we look at discovery, we've got, I'm suggesting that under the discovery bit, we've got finding things, using Google Alerts for a particular topic that you're looking at, using apps like the Researcher apps, which is available across different platforms and is brilliant at just pulling you up the latest paper, cross-referencing it to others, using social media, following particular hashtags, and then there's the Zotero, Mendeley, Colwiz, etc. What I'd like you to do in the text chat pane is just, first of all, under that discovering bit, does your content have digital support in it? I suspect Zotero and Mendeley may well be, but can you just pop in the text chat pane if there's anything that you have that we haven't got there, anything you suggest to students to use in that digital discovery phase that would help them. And if there's nothing, if you look at that and you think, oh my goodness, we don't have any of those things, then pop that in there. How might you use those? What could you do with that information? And when you get on the mind map, there's links to each of those in order to how to set up or how to download the app. So RefWorks and EndNote. Thank you, Elaine. That's really helpful. Paper pile, Lillian's popped in there. What's the comment above that? That looks, Helen, yes, a very good point. Everybody thinks that it belongs to somebody else. And that's exactly the point. So anybody else, any other elements that we can look at? So we've got Kate. Okay, so Kate's agreeing with that. With new search system, that's interesting. Visual organization of themes. I'd love to find out how you get on with that, Matilda. Lou's popped in the guides to digital searching. Excellent. Again, Gizzy's put in there RefWorks papers, subject-specific databases. Pippa's popped in there HAU, Harper Adams using RefWorks and NVivo. Okay, so great. What we'll do, if you're happy with it, in fact, to be honest, we might even do it if you're not happy with it. We'll steal your ideas just like we're inviting you to steal ours, and we'll add to this mind map at the end of the session. So that's the discovery stage. Now there's then the organizing stage, where again there's lots of tools. Evernote, we've got OneNote, Google Keep, etc. Now, many of these tools do brilliant things that students just don't know about. Where we've got extra elements there, we've got links, so you can open up those. But something like OneNote and Evernote, both of those are brilliant. If you've got a PDF, which is just a scanned document, and you see a quote in there which you think is brilliant, you can just take a screenshot of that quote, drop it into Evernote or OneNote, and extract the text from it, automatically OCR it. So many students just don't know that you can do those kinds of things. So under organizing, there's those elements there. Under the deciding, and again, what I'll do, I'll go quickly through this, and then I'll give you a chance to have a look at one or two that you might not have looked at already, or alternatively to add in others that you know of. But there's some strategic thinking I want you to do from this. We've got the deciding, so we've got mind mapping, and I'm sure many university websites I look at have got, they paid for mind mapping right across the network. The only place you find out about it is if you're a disabled student on the disability support part of the website. How is that a good return on investment? And so often I look in the study skills areas for information on mind mapping, or you can do mind mapping with Word in the navigation pane if you teach students to use the inbuilt heading styles. Workflowy, a lovely tool. My son uses that for doing major IT projects at the university he works in, just for organizing those things. And then the drafting bit, and this is the bit that often makes me bang my head on brick walls, is just no information about voice recognition. Even if the inbuilt Microsoft Dictate is not 100%, and inbuilt Google voice typing is not 100%, and Siri and your Android phone is not 100%, for a student that struggles to put words on paper or struggles to spell them, it's an amazing leap forward through that barrier of how do I get words on paper that Lillian was talking about earlier. There's even handwriting conversion, word prediction, word phrases, and banks. So again, all of that's there. I'll just briefly look at the last two before I let you, comment more. Language. So Grammarly, again, these are obvious ones that many people would kind of assume that students will use. The Microsoft inbuilt Microsoft Word tools, checking the reading level, looking at the Hemingway app, and again getting people aware of style and structure and level. Very often people appear to think that an academic paper needs to be really hard to read. If you can understand it, it's a badly written paper. That's not actually how it works. You might need technical terms, but if you can understand it, it's a really well-written paper, especially if it communicates complex ideas. And then the final bits, spelling, checking, grammar checker. There's also, somewhere it's gone missing, there's using text to speech to read back to you. Okay, so those are things. We've got another 5 minutes before I think Lillian then takes back over from me. So in that 5 minutes, I'd like you to have a look at one or two there that you think might be interesting, or one or two that you think could fill a gap in your content. Or alternatively, you could look at it strategically and you could say, okay, I can see there's loads of stuff there I know about. I'm not going to look at the details. I want to make a comment about how I would get ownership from different people, how I would influence people. So whatever level you want to take it at, individual tools that are great, things you want to suggest to us, or questions you want to bang around from this community of, what is it, 66 people, pop that in the text chat. So I'll be quiet for a few minutes while you do that. Samantha's talked about access to software via the virtual desktop. I think that's, that's quite a common way in which people make software available. The only thing is, it really does need to be very clearly signposted. I've been on a number of universities on the inside, on the VLE, doing audits and things, where we've there's a list of 100 tools, and in that list, because I know that some of those are really helpful assistive technologies, I could make use of them. But anybody that didn't have that clearly signposted wouldn't be able to find it. So if you're using those apps for kind of remote delivery, do make sure that maybe they're organized in categories, or there's some clear explanation about why it would benefit a student. So let's have a look at others. Apologies, I won't be able to see everybody's or mention. And Lillian or Ron, if you see anything.
Yeah, Helen gave a very good point about, like, crowdsourcing from students. Sometimes students come to uni having learned some things from their A-level tutors or further education tutors, and that could be helpful, or they come across stuff. And I just think our web pages don't invite contributions at the point where a student sees that stuff and goes, oh, they've missed out my favorite note-taking app, and we miss that opportunity to gather those insights from students, I think. And I just wonder if there's, scope for us to invite more participation on some of our writing sites.
I think that's brilliant. And the LexDis site, in fact, I'll put it in here, lexdis.org.uk, I think is that's the site that started off doing exactly that, asking students with disabilities what their tips were for other students with disabilities. I think that's the right one that I put in. I'm just going to double check this while people are still putting things in there. Keep those comments coming. There's lots of really good stuff coming. Let me just check the LexDis site. Yep, that's the right URL. So I will pop that in.
Well, it's the right URL at the moment. I mean, the point I was going to make is one of the problems with these kinds of projects for developing the guidance pages is often I mean, we've noticed even in this resource that we've updated, there's a few pages that we've had to hide because there were broken links to tools that didn't exist anymore, or to where the links have changed and we don't know the new ones. And so it's a regular challenge, isn't it, to keep them up to date?
It is a challenge, yeah. But I think very often the thing we need to communicate to students is not that if you use this particular browser plugin, it will be really helpful. I mean, there's Voice to Note, for example, is a browser plugin that actually does text to speech. I'm doing some work, I'm supporting a 12-year-old autistic lad who's been out of school for nearly a year now. And his writing is absolutely terrible. He uses the Voice to Note browser plugin because he just clicks on it. If he wants to do a Google search on something, he speaks it, it spells it for him, he pops it in Google search. It's transformed his ability to use the internet effectively. But if that stops working, he now knows that there are things that will do that. And that's where I think giving people not just the links, but the sense that there are tools that will do this. And if that tool ends up going paid for or ends up, you know, going pear-shaped, try a different tool. But if you don't know what the genres are or what the possibilities are, it's harder.
And we do a session later on in the year about being digitally savvy, and that's around, you know, what do you do when tools come and go, yeah, that's exactly it.
So it's time for me to pass back now. Is that to you, Lillian?
Yeah, I think it's just to introduce Alistair, do you mind?
Oh no, it was now. Shall I keep?
Do you
We
mind
were
screen
going to do
sharing?
just. No, I am screen sharing still, I think. Am I?
Yeah. So do you mind? Do you mind moving the slides on for us instead? Because I think all I'm doing is introducing.
Well, just before we introduce Lou, we were going to very quickly have a look at the update of our favourite resources. We were going to do a minute each on that.
Oh right, yeah. Okay. Very quickly then.
So I'll start that. Yes. So my favourite tools when I was teaching, teaching A-level geography, and the students really struggling, I did a lot of work with Word. I reverse engineered good essays, or I got them to upgrade bad ones. And with Word, it was dead easy, highly focused task. I could scramble paragraphs. I could have things that had arguments with no evidence, or evidence with, you know, gaps for the arguments, and they had to pick and choose and move around. We had poor essays that had some notes about why they were poor. They then had to simply use a different colored font to put in the additional information, argument, evidence, whatever, in order to make it a better essay. And this way we could be really focused on the specific skills we were developing. It was dead easy for them to write. It was dead easy for me to mark, and it made a huge difference to our exam results. And voice recognition I use all the time, free or paid for, wherever I can get it.
So my recommendations of what I personally do, I've taught to lecturers, and in this resource later, I'll introduce Jenny Truffaut, who has taken these ideas, and I introduced them to her and her tutors like 2 years ago, her students 2 years ago, and she now teaches these as part of her dissertation program directly to the students. So the way I've upgraded it really now is that things are so much better with transcription. So I use the otter.ai app, and I'll type that into the thing. There's a free 600 minutes version. I've just paid to upgrade because I love it so much. And it means that I can take videos, upload them, and get a transcript. So I can get my SRT files for captioning. When I'm in meetings and I have permission, I have a recording. So it's live transcription. So I can kind of, I'm quite motivated by seeing text. I love films with subtitles, put it that way. So when I'm in a meeting and I can see the text on the screen, I find I can focus better. There must be a thing about my brain, the way it works. So I love using Otter AI on the fly, and that's my new upgrade. What about Ron?
If you can open that tab.
Perfect.
I mean, this is a classic example of tools that go by the wayside, but the principle is the same, because under that sketchnoting heading there, the work visual app doesn't exist anymore. Rocket books, I think, still exist, but I don't tend to use them anymore. But basic principle is that I'm a big fan, and sketchnoting is just a new name for doodling, really. A little bit more complex to that, and I think we cover that in more detail during the rich media imaging session. But I'm a big fan of note taking, and that kind of list there from top to bottom really starts off with the capturing of ideas and thoughts wherever in a mobile workflow, and then using apps like Evernote or OneNote, depending on which tool you prefer, to have that kind of consistent access to notes on any device wherever you are. And then the sketchnoting with apps like Rocket, or apps with Rocket books and paper, or the digital equivalents with Concepts and Work Visual and so on. I use an iPad Pro and Apple Pencil, and I know that takes some getting used to, but I actually find it quite easy to use that for note taking. And then when it comes to forming all those notes into written resources, then obviously the standards of Notepad and Word and Google Docs and so on. I can't remember whether you mentioned Hemingway, Alistair.
Briefly, yeah, briefly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so thank you very much for those. And now Lillian is going to introduce Lou.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say that I'm looking forward to going back through the chat and looking at all the apps and tools that people have suggested, because it's such a rich resource. We're so much co-producing right now, which is fabulous. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Lou, who's going to take us through. She's in academic skills support, learning enhancement. She's going to take us through what she does, what she has used personally, and what she works through with students right now. Over to you, Lou.
I'll be the glamorous assistant. So
just
say yes when you need me to move.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Lil, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can.
Yay, cool. So hi, everyone. I'm Lou. I work in the Learning Enhancement team at the University of York. So we do lots of academic skills and academic writing support embedded in departments, and students can also come to us as well. So I'm just going to talk you through a note-taking system that I recommend to students to help them in their writing. Oh, thank you. So some of the common issues that we see, and I expect you might see the same things, or you other academic skills folks, is that students come and they say that reading takes too long for them, so they don't read enough, really. We see quite weak synthesis or analysis of the information that they found. So kind of quite often we see a kind of like a list of information that's summarized from sources. And then also sort of poor organization within the writing itself. So all of these can be greatly helped with an effective note-taking system. And I'll just kind of walk you through what I recommend to students. Yay, you're like reading my mind. This is awesome.
I am. It's great. The things I'm seeing in there.
So firstly, you just need a couple of tools. So preferably a reference management software of some type. I like the desktop version of Mendeley. Lillian is Team Paper Pile, but whatever, doesn't matter. Boo. Just get your papers, put them in some software, basically, make it nice and easy for yourself. And then choose a note-taking tool of some sort. So it could be more a traditional note-taking tool like Evernote or OneNote, or a spreadsheet thing. Just Google Sheets works nicely,
Yeah.
or heaven forbid, a pen and paper would also suffice here too. So once you've got those, the next bit then, is to make some sort of template, I guess. So kind of get ready for critical reading here. So identify the headings or the categories for whatever information you want to find in your papers. So that helps you focus on what's relevant. So you can read a lot quicker. So it makes approaching a sort of 20, 30 page paper a lot less overwhelming when you know, okay, I just want to find this, 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 and this, and you can just go in and grab it quickly. So you can read more quickly, which means you can read more papers, which is good, but it also encourages efficient note-taking as well. So if you've got a box to fill in, for example, under this heading, you're more likely to make sort of note style kind of things instead of big long sentences. And that also helps having these categories and headings. It makes your notes really easy to review as well, which is really useful for the later sections. Can we move on, please? Yay, thank you. So here's an example of an Evernote kind of template that I've used in the past. So on the left, we've got the different headings. So made a copy of this for each paper, and then just went through and made notes under each of the headings. It's quite texty still. I probably wouldn't do this again, but it is one way you could do that. Can we move on, please? Thank you. Here's an example using Google Sheets for this as well. So this is some notes that I made myself looking at kind of comparisons of online resources. So in comparison to face-to-face and different types of resources. So we got different headings here. So things like the stuff that I thought was important, like did it compare different resources, what type of resources, what was the finding of the task. There's other columns kind of that you can't see in this screenshot that were things like student preferences, feedback, stuff like that. There's about 55 papers summarized on this sheet here. Just makes it was really quickly to read them. You just go in and grab the information, write it on the spreadsheet, and it's really nice and easy to review as well. So I really recommend students do this now. It's just so easy to see all your notes. Can we go to the next part? Thank you. So when you have all your notes in your spreadsheet or your templates or whatever, you can use these really easy to synthesize the information together. So you can create a sort of second level of templates or a notes table that focuses on particular points if you want to. And this makes it really easy to pick out patterns in the different findings, similarities, differences, or things like focus on methodological methods or anything else that you're having a look at. So a couple of examples for you. Can we move on, please? Thank you. So this is one based on Evernote again, so you can put a table in Evernote. So going through all the sort of summaries of the papers and kind of just picking out the key findings in a couple of categories. And can we go on to the next one? Thank you. So this is the back to the online resources paper as well. So in spreadsheets, this is just another tab at the bottom of that spreadsheet that had the full notes that I made, just summarizing papers findings in different categories. So here we've got different comparisons of resources. So at the top, we've got online versus face-to-face resources. And then where online was better than face-to-face. In the next cell, we've got online is the same as face-to-face. And then we've got online is less effective than face-to-face. So just summarizing the papers together in these blocks makes it really easy to pick out patterns. Like you can just see by the number of papers in each square that, okay, clearly online resources are at least as effective as face-to-face resources. Hooray. Oh, can we go back?
Sorry. I misinterpreted hooray.
Sorry. But then you can also kind of dig a bit deeper in each. So you can see next to each paper's name, I've put in brackets the type of measure that they used. So you can kind of dig in a little bit to see even kind of more intricate patterns here. So all of the papers where the online was more effective than the face-to-face, these are kind of more authentic measures, things like the grades on an assignment or grade for a literature review or a citation analysis of a resource. Whereas ones where online is as effective as face-to-face, these are more sort of post-test after using the resource. So you can kind of dig down a little bit into the patterns, and there's other comparisons made as well. Okay, can we go on? Yay! So now when you've got this sort of synthesized notes, I guess, the sort of meta notes, I suppose, you can use these to plan like the broad sections of your writing as well. So you can kind of go through and see what the key points here. So for example, okay, one of the key aspects is comparing online to face-to-face and how effective those are. And then you can look at this more detailed as well. So for example, the situations where online was more effective, and then kind of move on to the next part, things like student preferences, which was another tab that I made and summarized everything with. So it kind of making these notes helps you to read more quickly, helps you to synthesize the information and see the patterns, and then is really useful for organization, I find as well. Can we go to the final one, please? Thank you. So then helps you to really write quite quickly at the end of all that. So here's the text that I made using those resources. The big paragraph in the middle is summarizing the information about online versus face-to-face instruction. That was written just by looking at the summary of all the papers together in that final table that I looked at. Really, really quick. You don't have to go back to the PDFs. You're not looking for highlighted sections or anything. So it's really quick. You get the information really easily. And when you strip out all the stuff you don't need, it's so much easier to see the important information and synthesize it together. So those examples were from my own work, but I've recommended this to students and they've said it's helped them to manage their reading more easily because they know what they're looking for. And it's been more useful for them to sort of synthesize ideas and make links between sources as well and use them to plan too. So it's been quite useful there. I've just seen that Rob has asked if they can get a copy of the spreadsheet.
I mean, if you don't mind, Lou, we
yeah,
can,
if it's
the
useful,
structure.
I can share it. Yeah,
we can share a blank structure with the future teacher account so that it's always there.
I'm happy to share I'm happy to share the spreadsheet that the screenshots were from. I don't mind. It's fine. I'll share that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'd like to read the paper.
It's not a paper. It's just a it's just a summary at the moment, but hopefully at some point.
Excellent. Thank you. Lillian, I think is going to just mention a little bit of something that comes up a lot of the time with when you're talking about writing. Lou's spoken very eloquently about how she organizes her own research and the way she could do that. But Lillian, you've got some other comments that you wanted to make about the follow-on from that.
Yeah, so another lecturer. So I mean, there are lots and lots of academic skills lecturers in our room at the minute, but I guess the proof of our pudding really that we cooked up when we created this resource over 2 years ago was how well it would work when translated into the classroom. And so on this page, when you come to look at the resource, we're not going to play this now, but Jenny has given me some feedback when I went into her class 2 years ago and showed them how to use mind mapping, how to kind of screenshot bits of text so that they could grab the text and add it to a note-taking app and stuff like that, and how to kind of just speak their ideas onto paper and then organize it later, how to use heading styles. And Jenny, no word of a lie, her students were so excited by these tools that really enabled them to write. One of them actually declared, shouting at me across a library foyer once, "You saved my life," which I thought was a bit more dramatic than it needed to be, but I thought that was so nice to hear from that student that it was helpful. So Jenny's done a summary of how it's helped her in her writing as a researcher, and therefore she now teaches this to her students. And this is what we were talking about in terms of agency, where as an academic skills team, you could be really small. You can't get to every single student. So where you can create agency in the lecturers to share these ideas directly to the students, your impact will be much greater. Okay, so next page really. Helen's going, it's really small team. So I think this was a page you put together originally, Alistair, but I can talk a little bit about something I came across in an idea when I went to the Assessment in Higher Education conference last year, in that time when we were still getting together face-to-face for conferences and sharing buffets. Yeah, remember those days? So we went to this conference and I had an amazing there was an amazing talk really by Philip Deakin. Let me see if I can share his Twitter. Yeah, Philip Dawson, sorry, from Deakin University. That's why I'm getting. He was the closing keynote speaker. And basically, his challenge to us was, in an age where you've got a lot of essay mill sites and students can take your essay title and upload it and get someone to write it for them. In an era where that exists, you're fighting a losing battle if you're trying to prevent them from using these sites. So his proposal was really, how can you design better writing assignments to overcome plagiarism? And he had a couple of really, really cool tips, one of which was get an essay mill to generate 2 versions of an essay about a particular topic and get the students to critique it, you know? So you're kind of making it a bit more meta, but students have to draw deeper in order to criticize or talk about these 2 essays. So you're overcoming that ability of the essay mill to generate something original at that point in time. The other thing he said was about authentic assessments, meaning a lot more of this reflective work week on week on week, because again, that's not something, reflection isn't something that plagiarism essay mill type software can easily create for you, you know, reflections on authentic situations. So these were just 2 ideas, but yeah, I suggest, you know, look through that slide, but then also look at Phil Dawson from Deakin University, look at his journal articles, follow him on Twitter, and let's have a look at that conversation.
Thank you. So plagiarism, or the irony bit at the beginning was, when we were researching for this originally, I got in touch with an essay mill, and I was just looking around to see what they did, and they asked me if they needed help, if I needed help. So I said, I'm researching academic malpractice, so I can make recommendations. So they were they saw this as a business opportunity. How many words do you need? When do you need it by? And so the conversation continued. It was rather fun. But I think now over to Ron.
Thank you, Alistair. Are
I'll
you
still
going to
be your
carry on?
assistant. I'll carry on if you want to do that. Yep.
That's great. So this is just a reminder, as we mentioned earlier on, that we have these journeys to complement the webinars that we've done. There's a journey for most of the topics, and there's a step-by-step guide on this page that will talk you through how to register and how to access those journeys. And what those journeys are really aimed at is extending the topic with the same resources, but additional resources, and more importantly, additional activities for you to put into practice and reflect on. So they're all self-access for you to access in your own time, but you will need to register on that particular VLE. It's a Norwegian VLE, so some of you may be interested, if only just to explore that different virtual learning environment. So if we move on, Alistair. This is just a page about us, and we usually make the point that if you're interested in all these future teacher resources, but you have a small team and would like extra help, then we'd be keen to hear from you and discuss how we might be able to help. But all the resources are available for free if you do have the time and resources to make use of them yourselves.
And
next, Alistair.
It's probably worth us saying, because people quite often don't realise this, that we're not paid. You know, the project, Future Teacher Project, finished a year ago. We keep it going because we love this community and we enjoy, you know, the pleasure of working with other practitioners. So this is all voluntary stuff, just in case you thought we were bringing in the mega bucks for it.
So the next steps, we always remind you to sign up to our mailing list if you haven't already. That's where we publicise the availability of the recording and so on. And we'd be very keen to hear from you if you'd like to do a guest speaker slot on our next webinar, which is on self-assessment and mastery learning. And that's on Friday, 26th of June at 1 p.m. The registration form isn't available yet, but will be probably at some point next week. But like I say, we'd be keen to hear from you if you'd like to do a guest slot, just like you've heard from Lou today, and in our previous sessions, the very you know, the wide range of guest speakers we've had is what keeps us motivated and what keeps the community motivated as well, I think. So we'd be very keen to hear from you. Just move on to the very last page quickly, Alistair, before we go back to that. So just a reminder that these resources are all created with a tool called Xerti, which is a free tool, and there's a summary there as to how we use it and why we use it and how it applies to using Xerti for supportive writing. We just go back to the previous page. We like to end with an activity for you all, and we'd like you to be as specific as possible. So in the, not in Alistair's shared screen, but in your own copy of the resource.
I'll put the link in.
Link in the text chat. What one thing will you do as a result of what we've looked at today? And like I say, try to be as specific as possible, because if everyone just puts revisit the resource or share the resource with colleagues, then that doesn't really kind of help any of us really to learn what was the most useful bit. So try and be as specific as possible. When you contribute to the text wall and hit submit, you'll see a link to then view the results. If you want to submit another response, then do that before you then follow the link to see the results. You can also use the text chat to do that, but the advantage of using the text wall is that those results will be available in the resource for people to view afterwards as well. Yeah, if you look at view the messages, Alistair, maybe see which ones have been posted.
I'm clicking on it, but nothing's happening. I think it may want me to post before I can view. Okay, I'll post something. I'm going to, oh no, here it is. It's coming, yeah. You couldn't ask a better one to kick off with. Yeah, keep focused on the goal and about the effective use of tools, and think about the genres of tools, so that if one tool goes belly up, people can still recognize that there'll be other tools that could do that job, and share about them and look for them. Yeah, there's lots of good tools there for you to look at. We've put links wherever we could put a link in the mind map. There's a link there, so if something looks interesting, click on the link and you'll be able to get that. Yeah, watching Jenny's video, definitely worth doing.
What's really nice is that if you have lecturers who think that writing isn't something that they should have to get involved with, you know, they just want to talk about their academic subject. That, you know, Jenny's one example, she teaches social policy, but really in university, there's nothing that you're doing that doesn't involve writing. Very little that you're doing that doesn't involve writing as a way of getting your idea out to other people. So everyone is involved in writing in one way or another. So there's lots to kind of learn from adopting some of these methods.
I notice Lou speaks probably for many people, saying, I mashed the submit button a bit too vigorously.
It's a reflective button.
Very
it's a
easy
Zen
to do.
button. You're supposed to kind of press submit and breathe and count to 10. We're still using this tool partly because it's a nice way to make sure that the messages are always there for other people who come on this journey asynchronously further down the line. So you can share this resource with other people who might have missed it, with your colleagues at your team, send them to the recording, and they can look through this resource, and when they get to this page, they can post a message and then they can see these answers for themselves. This is why we do this in the learning object and not just in the chat, if you see what I mean. Yeah.
I'm pleased that there's a few people going to take DODL back to their institution. I was very pleased with that acronym when it eventually emerged in the depths of the brain.
Thanks, Sally, and I hope you can join us, Sally, at some point as a guest speaker as well.
I've got to go to the same meeting that Sally's going to, actually, so maybe if Ron takes the screen share back. Do you want to take the screen share back?
Well, I'll stop the recording now because we've got no more pages to share, and then we usually have a bit of an informal